We weren't supposed to be on that floor. The elevators didn't even stop there anymore, and the stairwell door had been welded shut from the inside. But there was a second stairwell near the loading dock, and if you knew where to look, you could pry it open. We found it by accident, or maybe we were looking for it. The 5th floor used to be Pediatric's, closed after a fire in 2017. They didn't talk about it much, but people said you could still hear things up there. Laughter, rolling toys. Nurses on night shift claimed they heard footsteps in the ceiling. No one ever went to check. There were 4 of us, me, Jalen, and 2 nurses from the ER, Angie and Sophia. We were working a quiet Sunday night. No traumas, no visitors, barely any movement. Sometime after 2 a.m., someone brought it up again, the sealed floor. Angie dared us to go look, half joking. Jalen was already grabbing his coat. I said I didn't believe in that stuff, but I still took the flashlight and followed them up the stairs. The hallway hit us with the smell first. Dust, plastic, something stale underneath it. The air was warmer than it should have been. The paint was peeling from water damage, and cartoon murals lined the walls. Faded rainbows, sunflowers, a train track that ran along the baseboards. Someone had drawn smiling animals on the doors. Most of the names were still written on the whiteboards outside the rooms. It didn't feel haunted. Not at first, just abandoned. But I remember walking past a tiny wheelchair near the nurses' station and thinking, it's facing the wrong way. It was angled toward the wall, not the hallway, like someone had been put in timeout and never came back. Sophia kept fidgeting with her necklace while we walked, a little silver locket she always wore. I remember that now because it's what helped me recognize her later. We moved deeper down the hall. Some of the glass doors were taped up, others half open. The rooms still had beds, 4 poles, even stuffed animals. But in the playroom, the smell changed. It hit all of us at once. Not smoke, not mold, crayons. The toys were still there, shelves of books, puzzle boxes, wooden blocks, and tucked against the far wall was one of those plastic car beds, sized for toddlers. It had something in it. A plush giraffe with one button eye missing. Jalen picked it up and started making jokes. I think that's why no one noticed the chalkboard until a minute later. Someone had drawn on it. Recent, it said, nap time is over. Angie backed out first. She said she heard something down the hallway, a shuffling step. I didn't hear it, but when we turned our lights toward the doorway, we all noticed the same thing. The hallway lights had flickered. Not a full pulse, just a twitch, like the power blinked for a fraction of a second. The breaker should have been off. Sophia said we should leave. Jalen didn't argue. We started walking back, slower this time. I brought up the rear. Just before we passed the fire door again, I saw something shift near the window. It was a child's handprint, on the inside of the glass. No fog, no breath, just a dry, powdery print. But I swear it hadn't been there before. Back in the stairwell, we heard something fall behind us. A loud clack, like a chair tipping. I turned to look, and for a second, I could swear the giraffe was lying in the doorway to the playroom, the same one Jalen had picked up. Except he still had it in his hand. We didn't talk much after we got back downstairs. It was late. Everyone just grabbed their stuff and left. But when I went to clock out, I noticed something on the staff bulletin board. Someone had pinned a photo to it. A staff holiday party from years ago. Nurses in red scrubs holding little kids in hospital gowns. I looked closer. There was a woman in the back row, smiling, arms folded, wearing the same necklace Sophia had worn tonight. Same pendant, same locket. It wasn't a match. It was her. But the photo was dated 2016. I didn't say anything at first. I figured it was a coincidence. But then Sophia came in the next shift, wearing a different chain. I asked her what happened to the necklace. She blinked, looked confused, then said, "What necklace?" It was 2 days after that, when I opened my locker at the end of a shift. Sitting inside was the same stuffed giraffe, same burnt smell, same melted plastic tag. I took it out, put it in a bag, and threw it away in the outdoor dumpster. That should have been the end of it. But when I came back the next day, it was back in my locker, sitting upright, facing me. It started with a name I wasn't supposed to see again. I was walking in for night shift, checking the assignment board like always, and there it was. Room 6B. Patient, John T. I froze for a second. That was impossible. 2 nights earlier, I'd watched John T die in that room. Middle-aged man, high fever, full-body infection. He coded around 3:20 a.m. We couldn't bring him back. I helped bag the body myself. There was no mistaking it. So when I saw his name again, same room, same diagnosis, I thought someone had messed up the board, but the timestamp was fresh. I checked the digital chart. Same birthday, same allergies, same emergency contact. I walked to 6B half expecting to find someone else, but when I opened the door, he was sitting upright in bed. Awake, hooked to fluids, and staring right at me. I've been a nurse for 7 years, float pool. That means I get dropped into whatever unit needs coverage, and lately it's been a lot of ICU. The staff knows me. I don't mess with protocol. I double-check meds. I don't jump at shadows. So when I started noticing something off, I didn't say anything right away. I just watched. You see a lot on nights. Hallucinating patients, sleep-deprived staff, machines glitching. You learn not to overreact. So I gave myself excuses. Maybe it was a different guy with the same name. Maybe someone typed the wrong date of birth. But it wasn't just the name. It was his face. And the way he looked at me. He didn't say much, just nodded. I asked how he was feeling. He said, hot. That's all. His vitals weren't great but stable enough. But there was a bruise on his wrist. Same spot the first John T had blown an IV. It wasn't in the notes. And no one else seemed to think anything was weird. The attending that night was new. Young guy, a little arrogant, kind of brushed me off when I asked about the admission. Just said, he came in earlier sick, we're monitoring. I asked if he'd seen him conscious. He hesitated, then said, not yet. He wasn't being hostile, just dismissive, like he didn't want to admit he hadn't done a full check. I've worked with doctors like that. They don't like questions from nurses that point out gaps, but it still bugged me. Something about the way he said it, too fast, like he already had the answer loaded. Later that night, while helping reposition another patient, I overheard a couple nurses talking about a weird call they got from the lab. Apparently someone had requested blood work on a John T that didn't match any active order. The lab thought it was a duplicate. They sent the results anyway. Then someone from downstairs called, asking why there was a body tagged John T already logged in their system. That's when I finally pulled Rachel aside. She's one of the charge nurses I trust, and I told her the full story. She didn't roll her eyes. She got real quiet, then said, this isn't the first time. She said the name had popped up before. Maybe not always John T, but the same setup, same room, same symptoms, same time of night. I asked if anything ever came of it. She just said, they always crash before sunrise. I went back in just before shift change. John was asleep again. His skin looked paler. There was this faint smell in the room, like damp cloth and peroxide. His monitor beeped slow and steady. I leaned in a little. His eyes opened. No warning, just popped open. He looked at me and said, you don't have to come back. That was it. No other movement. The monitor flatlined 10 minutes later. I stayed long enough to help wrap the body. When the porter came to take him down, I checked the chart one more time. The photo in the digital file looked wrong. Not different exactly, but off. The lighting didn't match the ones we usually take. The background behind his head was too dark. I didn't mention it to anyone. Not that shift. But it stuck with me. I kept thinking about that bruise and how the second John T. had said the exact same word, hot, when I asked how he felt. Like it was a script he'd already read once. I never saw him again. But last week I bumped into a nurse from a different hospital system during a training. She told me a story, completely out of the blue, about a patient with a bad infection who kept showing up on different floors. Sometimes awake, sometimes not. Always just for a few hours before he died. She didn't say the name, but I asked what he looked like. She said, "I don't know. He had that kind of face you forget as soon as you turn away." And now I keep wondering if one night, months from now, I'll open that room again, and he'll be sitting there, awake, waiting. I woke up from surgery with pain in the wrong part of my body. Not my shoulder, the place they were supposed to operate, but lower down, deep inside my side. It hurt to breathe. I could barely turn my head, and when I looked down, I saw a thick bandage wrapping across my ribs. I was supposed to be getting routine shoulder surgery. Outpatient. A couple of tiny incisions near my collarbone, a few hours in recovery, and home by evening. I'd put it off for years. Old sports injury from college that kept flaring up, but I finally scheduled it between work contracts. I don't like hospitals. I just wanted to get in and out. But now I was in a hospital bed, hooked up to fluids, heart monitor beeping steadily. No one had told me why I was still there, and no one had mentioned the extra incision. The nurse noticed I was panicking. She told me everything went fine, that it was just confusion from the anesthesia. But I wasn't confused. I was in pain, and I knew that pain wasn't in my shoulder. I asked her what they did, and she said, "Just the shoulder. That's all." But I could feel the bandage pressing into my ribs. I could feel stitches pulling when I inhaled. I tried to sit up, but my vision spun out. I think they gave me something because everything went dim again. Next thing I remember, I was in a different room, in a regular hospital bed. Not recovery, admitted. My chart was hanging at the foot of the bed, so I grabbed it when no one was looking. It only had one procedure listed, the shoulder. No mention of abdominal anything. But the post-op notes did mention observed low blood pressure and extended monitoring due to complications. Nothing specific. I buzzed for the nurse and asked why I had stitches near my ribs. She went completely still, then said she'd call the attending. The guy who came in next wasn't my surgeon. He introduced himself as someone from general surgery and said there had been a minor issue during intubation and that I tensed unexpectedly, which caused a deeper sedative response. That didn't make sense. I asked about the incision again. He said I must be mistaken, that some of the adhesive used for the heart monitor patches can leave redness or irritation. I pulled down the blanket and showed him the gauze. He just looked at it, then said someone would be in to redress the area soon, and he left. Didn't answer a thing. That night, a different nurse came in. She was older, quiet. She didn't know I was awake when she started changing my IV bag. I asked her, "What happened to my side?" She jumped a little and said, "You shouldn't be awake," then quickly left the room. After they gave me another sedative, I started checking things on my phone, whatever I could find online. There were old forum posts, buried Reddit threads, all vague but saying the same thing. Unexplained abdominal scars after unrelated surgeries, sudden follow-up calls for blood work, unexplained fatigue or infections weeks later. One post stood out. It was from a guy who'd gone in for ankle surgery, only to wake up with stitches on his lower stomach. His discharge papers said nothing. When he asked for records, the hospital claimed he had consented to exploratory imaging. He said he never signed anything like that. But what got me was the photo he posted. His scar looked almost identical to mine. Same angle. Same spot. I found one story, dated over 10 years ago, about a guy in Florida who woke up missing part of his liver after a supposed hernia repair. The comments under it were full of people saying it was fake, but someone had replied with a list of hospitals. Mine was on it. When they finally discharged me, I went straight to an independent clinic for a scan. Told them I'd had abdominal trauma and wanted to rule out internal damage. The doctor there didn't ask many questions, but when the scan came back, he asked if I'd ever had a partial nephrectomy, removal of part of a kidney. I told him no. He just stared at the screen for a few seconds, then quietly said, "Well, it's not all there anymore." A day later, I got a call from a blocked number. A woman with a calm, professional voice said she was following up on post-anesthesia indicators and asked if I'd be willing to come back for blood work. She said they were monitoring long-term sedative metabolization. I asked what department she was from. She paused, then hung up. I tried to get my records. The hospital gave me a sanitized PDF, no mention of complications, nothing about general surgery. When I called to request the raw OR notes, they said I'd have to file a formal request through legal. They were too fast to say it, like they'd done this before. I reached out to a medical malpractice attorney, told him everything, sent over the imaging. He said the same thing. This wasn't a one-off. He'd heard of cases like this, but none had made it through court. They never go to trial, he told me. They just go quiet. I asked how many cases he'd seen like mine. He said 3, all with the same pattern. Off-record surgeries, vague complications, altered paperwork, all dismissed, all settled under strict NDAs. And in each one, the person eventually stopped pushing. They make it too expensive, he said, or too scary. That was 6 months ago. I've stopped trying to get the full OR report. My lawyer said if they haven't turned it over yet, they never will. I still feel the stitches sometimes when I stretch. That pulling sensation, like something's still healing. But every doctor I've asked swears it's scar tissue, except one. He said, "It doesn't feel like a surgical scar." Then he paused. "It feels like extraction." I saw a hand once. Human, limp, just barely visible, resting at the edge of the morgue tray. The rest of the body was still inside Morgue Unit 3, one of the rolling drawer compartments we used for storage. But the hand was lying there like it had reached out on its own. I didn't imagine it. I was 3 feet away. It had a tag on the toe. The name on it was Jonathan Gray. That's not the kind of thing you expect to see during a night shift. I wasn't a coroner, just custodial support, the guy who cleaned the room, wheeled in the dead, and signed paperwork. Night side, low traffic, mostly quiet. I took the job because it paid decent and no one bothered me. But after 6 months, I started noticing things that didn't make sense. Units that unlatched, tags that didn't match, doors that opened on their own. And then came the moment I stopped trying to explain it all away. It started small. One night I'd taken in 3 patients from the ER, 2 elderly, 1 younger male. I locked all 3 units, noted the positions, logged everything. When I walked past an hour later, Unit 3 was slightly open. Not all the way, just cracked. Enough to let the cold out. Enough to feel wrong. I assumed I'd made a mistake, but when I pushed it closed, it resisted slightly, like something was pressing back from inside. When it finally latched, a rush of chilled air hit my face, sharper than normal, like old metal and disinfectant. I didn't report it. I just told myself to pay more attention. But a few nights later, it happened again. Different body, different unit. Same thing. The tray slightly out, condensation on the seal, no obvious cause. That's when I started wondering, what if these units were being opened when I wasn't looking? I needed a way to tell if anything had been disturbed. So I made a tiny scratch in the paint next to each latch using a paperclip. just enough that the scratch would line up perfectly with the handle. If the handle got shifted or turned even slightly, the alignment would be off. 3 nights later, I checked them again. One of the handles was just a little off-center, not enough for anyone else to notice, but it didn't line up with the scratch anymore. We had a security cam above the hallway entrance, but it only faced the door. No one had come in or out for hours. No one else had access, and yet things were clearly being moved. Then came the man in scrubs. I was taking out the biohazard bin around 2 a.m. when I passed someone heading the other direction. Tall, pale, shaved head, blue scrubs. He didn't look at me, just walked past like he had somewhere to be. But when I turned to check, he was gone. No doors had opened, no sound, just vanished. That same night, Unit 3 unlatched again. I didn't approach it. I just sat at my desk and stared, heart racing. Something told me if I moved, it would open the rest of the way. The next morning, the intake coordinator flagged an error. Said a body had been logged but never assigned to a unit. He asked if I remembered processing it. I said no. Then he showed me the chart. The name was Jonathan Gray. My heart nearly stopped. That was my brother's name. He died 3 years ago. Motorcycle crash. Different state. We weren't close anymore, but I went to the funeral. I saw the body. He was cremated. I froze. I even asked the intake coordinator to read it out loud, like I didn't trust my own eyes. He said the tag had already been picked up, that sometimes things got mislabeled during transfer, but my stomach was in knots. That wasn't a common name, and it wasn't just the name, it was the timestamp. The body had arrived right around the time Unit 3 had unlatched that night. I should have quit then, but I needed the job. That night I showed up like usual, made my rounds, double-checked every latch. At 3:12 a.m., the lights flickered. Not the usual buzz. This was hard. Blackout for half a second, then back. When they came on, Unit 3 was open by a foot. I walked over slowly, heart in my throat. That's when I saw the hand. Pale, relaxed, lying just at the tray's edge. I saw the curve of a wrist. And the tag. Same name. I slammed the unit shut, locked it, and didn't open it again. That was my last shift. 2 weeks later, I got a call from someone in administration. They said they were doing a routine audit on older post-mortem entries. Asked if I could verify my shift from March 17th. I told them I didn't remember anything unusual. They paused, then said one entry stood out. A body had been processed, but there was no autopsy file, no photos, no samples, just the tag and the name, Jonathan Gray. Then they said something else. The body had no autopsy cuts, no signs of surgical entry. The skull was intact, but the brain was gone. Not damaged, not decomposed, just missing, like it had been removed without ever opening the head.